little bit closer? Thank you. Cool, appreciate it, thank you. Great. Okay, thanks very much. Okay, thank you all for coming out tonight. This evening, we are pleased to present the third program in our Professional Practices series that is being coordinated by Lauren Rossi. Lauren is using her wide network of contacts to help us bring some exciting speakers to the campus. Tonight, Lauren will first present best practices for artist websites. She will then be followed by Brandon Colvin, who will talk about the benefits and challenges associated with social media marketing for artists. Lauren Rossi is a Detroit-based cultural producer and creative consultant. She has expertise in arts and project management, professional development, grant writing, and strategic planning, and is dedicated to supporting LGBTQ+ artists, women, and artists of color. She works as studio manager for TIF Massey, an interdisciplinary artist based in Detroit. In 2019, Lauren was co-curator of arts and culture for Republica Detroit in partnership with Europe's largest conference on the Internet and Digital Society. Since 2016, Lauren has worked to design and implement the Kresge Artist Fellows Professional Practice Opportunities Program and has led workshops to empower and inform the practices of creative industries practitioners throughout Southeast Michigan and beyond. Rossi received her BFA in Fine Arts and Art History from Eastern Michigan University. It's now my great pleasure to invite Lauren to the podium. Lauren.
Thanks, Judy. Really happy to be back here at Cranbrook in the new year. So happy New Year, everybody. I haven't seen any of you yet. Tonight we're going to be talking about best practices for building your artist website. How many of you, if I could get a show of hands, how many of you have your own artist website? Okay, awesome. And how many of you that have an artist website are really happy with it? Feel like it's spot on, it's perfect? Okay, we got a couple shaky hands. Okay, cool. So we're going to talk through some of the basics, but hopefully even those of you who have websites and those of you who are shakily happy with yours can still get something out of this. So your website should be completely dedicated to you and your work. Think of it as a studio visit where you're not present. A visitor to the site should be able to find all of the information they need, including images of your work in detail, excerpts of your writing, information about your career, your bio, artist statement, and any other relevant press or reviews of your work. They should be able to learn about your upcoming public events and projects. It's a tool to communicate with your audience, as well as allow them to communicate with you. It's important to remember that your site will often be a viewer's very first introduction to your work. It doesn't matter how much you like or dislike technology. Complete ignorance of the internet and social networking will put you at a disadvantage. So it's very important as an individual artist to have your own website. A well-designed functional website is a great promotional tool for both emerging and mid-career artists. Whether you choose to design your own website or have someone else design it for you, you'll have a tool that anyone in the world can access to learn about you and your work. Your website should have clear navigation and quality representations of your work. So tonight we're going to talk about getting started, content for your website, some pro tips that I have for you, protecting your work on your website, and also search engine optimization and analytics. The first thing I would encourage you to do, whether you have a website already and are thinking about a redesign, or you don't have a website and would like to make one, is to do some research. Look at other artists' websites. Specifically, artists that you know and like, who you might already follow. If you've seen their website before, go back and take another look. Look at all of the artists' websites that you know about. And also, I've found it helpful to do a Google search and you can actually search best artist websites and just see what comes up, because you'll find, lists, like there's lists of the best of everything. You can find a list of best artist websites, which will point you in the right direction, just some things to check out. And so I recommend that you do some research, really look at other artist websites, make notes about what you like and don't like about them. Make notes about how things are set up. If you're, you can take screenshots to keep things in mind for when you're making your own. Getting started, step one is to secure your domain name. So choosing the right domain name is one of the most important decisions that you can make. I think the logical first step for all of us in choosing a domain name would be to try to get yourname.com. That sometimes works if you're lucky, but for most people, chances are, unless you have a very unique name, it might already be taken. So I recommend thinking about your name artist.com, your name artwork, or adding some other descriptor. But I think it's really important to have your name in your domain name, if at all possible. Avoid things that are really difficult to spell, things that would be really difficult for people to remember. If possible, the best choice is still to get the .com version of your domain name to avoid someone else getting traffic when looking for you. So remember that domain names can't have spaces or characters other than letters, numbers, and dashes. They're just pointers to your actual website. So you can actually connect multiple domain names to a single website. So if you wanted to go out of your way to get yourname.com, .org, .art, all of those things, you can do that and set them all up to point to one website. So the next step is selecting a platform, which we'll talk about more in a moment. But that's the service that you're going to use to host your website. And then once you select what platform you're going to use, you're going to want to choose a template. And templates are almost infinite. And so it's probably going to take a little bit of time to narrow it down and to choose one. But just remember that it is something that takes time to find the right one, to find one that you feel really speaks to you and to your work and is going to be the best representation of your work. And going back to the idea of doing some research, that'll really help you identify what type of template you might want to use. And then I encourage all of you, if you don't have one already, to get a logo. And this you can add to your website and also include in all of your other sort of personal branding for your artist self. If you're not interested in getting sort of a visual image as a logo, you can always find a font that you really like and have your name in that font, and that kind of becomes your branded logo. So the best website builders for showcasing art are ones like Squarespace, Weebly, Wix, Duda, GoDaddy, Strikingly, and WordPress.com. Here's some notes on all of them. There are tons of possibilities. So again, it is worth your time to do a little bit of research, look at all these different sites and see which has the best affordability for you, which ones have the best design templates. Think about what are the most important things to you. So next we're going to talk about how to organize your website. So what are the pages that you need on your website? So every artist's website should have a home page or a landing page, a portfolio or artwork albums. You're going to want to have an about page that should include your bio, your CV, and your artist statement. You should have a press page that includes press and relevant articles and reviews of your work, and a contact page. So this is an example of what I think is a really fantastic homepage or landing page for an artist, Chantel Martin. This is just a screenshot of her site, but I encourage you all to take a look at her website and see when you move the mouse around, these illustrations in the background move. You can click on work, so she's placed that prominently so that you can directly go to her work, but there's also a menu that you can click on to gain access to the rest of the information on her website. So your website's main navigation should be simple yet thorough. The menu bar can either appear on the side of the page or on the top of the page or as a drop-down. It should have as few items as possible, and be sure that the terminology that you use is accurate and the words on the menu bar are straightforward and clear, such as about, news, CV, contact, work, etc. Drop-down menus are okay to have, but keep them at a minimum. If the menu bar conveys that there is an overwhelming amount of content on the site, people might leave the site immediately because they're not interested in being overwhelmed. Including news on your website is a really good idea. This gives people the chance to right away see what you have coming up. So this could be opportunities to engage with you, like at open studios and things like that, upcoming exhibitions, etc. This can be included on your homepage, or it can be your homepage, or if you want to, you can have a separate news page. Next is including or presenting your portfolio, your artwork on your website. I have a few different examples to talk through. This is just one example. TIF Massey, who's an artist based in Detroit who I work with, we have her website organized so that all of her artwork is organized by year. So you can organize however it makes sense for you, but there should be some overall structure and a way that people can navigate your work, whether it's organizing things by year or by medium. If you work in a variety of different forms, for example, this artist has a section specifically for painting and a section specifically for sculptures. For TIF's work, we could have installation, we could have video, we could have sculpture, jewelry, and divide it thematically that way. I mentioned the About page, and this is the opportunity to really share more text about your work, about you. You should have your bio on this page. You should have your CV, and you should have your artist statement. You should also have an image of you so that people can see what you look like. And this can either be a headshot if you like, or if you're maybe not so comfortable with just having your face right on your website, you can have a shot of you working in the studio. You can have a variety of images, but this is really the place to highlight you as an individual artist. So your artist statement is separate from your bio, and it is all about your work. It should be simple and talk about how and why you work, why you do what you do. Mention what medium and what materials you're drawn to. Keep it short and generally use the first person, I, instead of writing about yourself in the third person, she or they or he. You can place the bio and the artist statement together on a single about page, or you could, if you wanted to, have an about page up in the top navigation, and this is a good place to have a drop down where you can have CV, artist statement, bio, etc. You can include your CV as its own page where you have your entire CV actually visually in text on your website, or you can have the option to download your CV, or you can do both so that people can download a PDF of your CV if they'd like to. This is a great place where you can include links, including past exhibitions on your CV. So likewise, you can also have a separate page for exhibitions if you want to list all of your past, present, upcoming exhibitions, or you can include them in your CV, but this is a great place to include links to the individual exhibitions themselves, to the galleries or museums or other organizations where your work was actually displayed, other artists that you've displayed with, etc. The press page, you should absolutely make sure to include links. So this is an example that I pulled off of an artist website, and every single one of these items is actually linked to the article online. So the contact page, you have a couple of different options here as well. Some people prefer to have a contact form on their contact page instead of actually advertising to the world their email address. So this is an option that you can set up where people enter their contact information. They can send you an email basically through your website that then just comes into your email box, but it's not a way that people have then access to your email address. I encourage you, if you do list your email address on your website, to format it like this example here on the right. And the reason that you would want to do that and actually spell it out is so that you don't get so much spam. One thing to keep in mind, if you do list your email on your website, you should make it a link so that people can easily just click on it and open an email and send an email to you. The one thing that you absolutely don't want to do is just make it an image of your email address so that people actually have to go back and forth and type it out rather than just being able to cut and paste it from your website. So a few tips for designing a great visual artist website include choosing one or two fonts. You don't want things to be super busy, and mixing and matching fonts on different pages can look really messy. So choose one or two fonts and use them exclusively through your site. Make sure that your font styles and sizes are easy to read, preferably. Choose 2 or 3 colors for your website that you'll use consistently throughout the whole thing in terms of the actual design of the site. I recommend using a white background to make it easier for your art to stand out and to make text easier to read. Although a darker background can be striking, it takes a lot of design skill to make sure that the color isn't overwhelming. Capture some of your personality and a predominant aesthetic of your artwork in your website design if possible. Your site should be a reflection of your work and your personal brand. Use photos of your work for the images on your site, in case that's not obvious. Refrain from taking attention away from your work with any other pictures or graphics or any other design that's not your own. Keep copy to a minimum on most pages of the website because, again, you don't want to distract too much from what people are really there to look at, which is your artwork. And very importantly, you want to be able to update your website regularly. So even if you end up hiring someone else to design your site for you, it's really important that you learn how to access and update your website on your own. You want to update your website every 6 months at the very least. If you don't, a visitor might assume that you're no longer a practicing artist, which would be the worst case scenario, I think, for all of us. This should be easy to do if you're adding new artwork to your portfolio or adding additional exhibitions, upcoming exhibitions, and gallery shows to your calendar. And adding news about these things will keep Google and your audience coming back to your site regularly. So another thing to keep in mind is including links to your social media if you want to. Not everybody does, but it's another way for people to engage with your work. So include links to your social media. You also can have the opportunity to include links, on individual works of art for people to actually share. If you're into that thing, if you want Instagram going wild over your artwork, you can actually include links for people to share your work directly from your website to social media if you'd like. So e-commerce is what you need to know about if you want to sell your artwork or other merchandise through your website. For many artists, your website is really just an online portfolio, and some artists actually choose to sell either original works of art or prints or other types of merchandise through their website. So some platforms like Wix and Squarespace have e-commerce baked in. So that's something to consider when you're looking for the platform that you want for your website. And certain platforms use third-party integrations to provide this functionality. So protecting your work. I think that this is something that is a concern for most of the artists that I work with. There's no doubt that posting your work online can be risky. At the same time, in this increasingly digital art world, online exposure is often critical for an artist's success. While nothing is foolproof, there are some measures that you can take to protect your art on your website. So you can convert your images to Flash before posting them online. And this makes it so that they're basically baked into your website so that they're not images that somebody can click on and save. I recommend publishing smaller, low-resolution images, generally because a small, low-resolution image just isn't worth stealing for most people. However, remember that before you run off and resize all of your images to thumbnails for your website, make sure that you do not save them over your high-res images. Pro tip. For all that you hold dear, save the web-ready version as a separate file. And consider adding watermarks to your images. If this is something that you're really concerned about, people taking images from your website, you can add a watermark. This is, your name or a logo placed in the corner of your image. It can be subtle. It can be something that you wouldn't even really notice just looking at the image, but if somebody downloads the image and opens it later, it's clearly got your mark on it. One of the most used is the copyright notice, best known as the little C symbol in the circle. So you'll also want to make sure that there's a copyright notice on your website. This will show up in the bottom of the page throughout your site, meaning that you own the copyright to the entire site and all of its contents. So here's an example again from Chantal Martin's website. And this is something just to pay attention to as you're going in, you're looking at other artists' websites. You can check and see, do they all have this? And most of them do. So before your website's made public, it's really important to test how it looks on different browsers. Just because it looks okay on your desktop in Safari doesn't mean that it'll look great on a cell phone using Chrome. The best way to make sure it's looking good on all devices is to use a responsive site. Most themes will tell you whether or not they're responsive as you're looking through different options. Still, don't assume it's working. Check for yourself before publishing your site. Look at it on your phone, look at it on your friend's phone, check it in different browsers as well. Okay. So we'll touch briefly on search engine optimization. And search engine optimization is the process of increasing the quality and quantity of website traffic by increasing the visibility of a website to users of web search engines. So SEOs refer to improvement of unpaid results and excludes direct traffic or visitors and the purchase of paid placement. So what this means is that if somebody's just going directly to your website, they know where they're going, they're getting directly to your website. But basically, there are behind-the-scenes tricks to increasing your search ranking. So if somebody Googles your name, is your website going to be the first thing that they find? So I recommend here doing your research as well. So do a Google search, specifically SEO for artists, to find a lot of resources. But basically, you want to figure out your keywords and your target audience and come up with as many keywords as you can, and then you embed those keywords into the terms that you're using on your website, the actual text on your website. So your artwork titles, your image labels, think about these words showing up in your bio, in your artist statement, in your about page. One thing to note is that search engines generally don't search for images, and so titling your images, even if it's just in the back end of your website, these will all help in search engine optimization. So, and then the last thing is Google Analytics. And for those of you who don't know, Google Analytics is a web analytics service offered by Google that tracks and reports website traffic. Once you sign up, you'll get a code that you can add to the back end of your website for tracking. So information that you can glean from Google Analytics includes how much traffic you're receiving to your website, what content is most popular on your website, what online marketing activities bring you the most traffic or sales, where your site visitors are located and other demographics, what your best and worst performing pages are. And you can tell how well your social and email campaigns are performing if you have sponsored content that you're using on other platforms to direct people to your website. And this is a really interesting tool, and you can get super nerdy about it, or you can just kind of take it for what it is and just kind of keep an eye on your website. You can look and see how many, every single day, you can see how many people have visited your website, where in the world those people live, and you can find out how much time they spent on your website. It's really an invaluable tool for understanding how your website is actually functioning out in the world. So that's it for the nuts and bolts, but I wanted to open it up if anybody had questions. Anybody? Yeah. Sorry, I can't quite hear you.
You were talking about keeping it minimal in menu,
Mm-hmm.
and I was thinking if you create a long form or a long subtitle,
Mm-hmm.
how would you recommend to design it on your website?
So the question is keeping the menu to a minimum, but if you have a lot of work or a lot of subtitles, how do you organize it? Rather than making everything, come down in a drop down from your main menu, you can kind of create sub-menus on each of the individual pages. So, for example, in organizing your work, I mentioned that you could actually have, buttons at the top of the page to organize things by year or by theme, sort of by series, things like that. So if your work is really, if you can kind of categorize it, I would use those categories as sort of a sub-menu. And then within those categories, you can kind of break it down and direct people further. Okay? Yes?
You generate both a large amount of work and also work in numerous media.
Mm-hmm.
Would you be as general as possible with that? Would you organize it by year, just go by project by project?
So the question is, if you're generating a lot of work and if you're working in different types of media, would you kind of keep it all together, or would you divide it up into sort of different categories? I think it's really a personal preference. And this is another really good opportunity for you to kind of look at other artists' websites and see how they do it and see what you would prefer. If you really think about your work, even if you're working in all different types of media, if you don't really think about your work as being separated into categories, it might not make sense for you to separate it into those categories. But if you're making, painting and sculpture and installation, and those bodies of work are really distinct, it might make sense for you to kind of categorize them that way, especially if you know that your audience or people who are familiar with your work might be interested in looking at one particular body of work that way. But it's really about your personal preference, what you're comfortable with, and what makes you happy in terms of the way that you want to present your work in your website. Any other questions? Okay. Great. Well, thank you very much. I'll be here all night. If you have any questions a little bit later, happy to answer for you. And I'm going to, at this point, introduce you to our next presenter. So our next presentation is on social media marketing for artists, and I would like to welcome Brandon Christopher Colvin, who's a Detroit-based creator and owner of Canvas Detroit, an arts engagement platform dedicated to developing art-based solutions for social and civic problems. After graduating from Detroit's Build Entrepreneurship Institute in 2013, Brandon launched Canvas Detroit's first location on Woodward Avenue in the heart of downtown Detroit, offering painting classes, art exhibitions, installation work, and creative workshops for professionals. Brandon is a 2015 Night Arts Challenge winner, a 2016 Night Arts Challenge finalist, and co-founder of MASH Detroit, a 6,000 square foot mixed-use community space designed to promote authentic communication across racial, culture, and geographic barriers. Brandon is also a 2018 American Express Leadership Academy Fellow, a Ford Man of Courage, a member of the International News Leadership Council, Trust Project. In his spare time, Brandon teaches entrepreneurship for Build Institute, design thinking for Wayne State University's SMASH program, and social media marketing classes for Facebook. So welcome, Brandon.
Thank you so much, Lauren. Got a creaky mic here. Good evening, everybody. So glad to see such a large crowd. Obviously, we'll be talking today about social media marketing. I guess we could start with how many of you all represent your work on social media? Okay, so nearly everybody. I think a good place to start as well is being pretty conversational. So I'll probably be calling a couple of you out to actually engage. I think sometimes we think or make the mistake of thinking that social media is just an opportunity for us to talk at people. But really, it's an opportunity, a valuable opportunity for us to engage in conversation and really build, hopefully, some relationships with other people and even potentially other organizations that exist alongside you in the social media space. So with that being said, can someone share with us what your favorite platform is to use on social media and why? Instagram? Okay, why do you like Instagram? Yeah. Yes, Instagram's very clean, and we'll be talking a little bit about Instagram. I teach a course, a social media marketing course for Facebook, which includes a little small module on Instagram. Most of it is Facebook really trying to get class participants to buy Facebook ads. I tell them that at the beginning of the course because a lot of people think they come into the course thinking, oh, you're going to give us the key to how to defeat, the ever-changing algorithm. And I'm like, nah, sorry, that's actually not what's happening here. But there are, I think, a lot of valuable tips and tricks that we can employ to increase our impact on social media, and just some also very basic things that we can do to just have better outcomes with regard to putting our work on social media, and also taking the opportunity to effectively express to other social media users who we are as creatives and what we do and why it's important and why they should give a damn. Okay, so, all right. So today, what you all should expect to learn is what is social media. I think we generally kind of know what social media is, but I think it's important to properly frame what it's all about. And I think it's also an opportunity for you all to think about, how am I framing my work? Am I framing my work in such a way that is easily accessible, that is easily understandable, and that casts me in the best light? It's one thing to just throw a photograph up of your work, or as Lauren shared with us, to make sure you've got clear photographs on your website and that is easily navigable. But it's another thing to do it in such a way that, again, people give a damn about, that people are going to not only care but continue to return to it, to look to you for updates. Lauren mentioned, hey, you should be updating your website every 6 months at least, right? So framing is going to be really important. What is marketing? Lauren mentioned I teach an entrepreneurship course for Build Institute. And part of that is talking to students, many of whom are adults and already own businesses, about how to be more effective in their marketing. So we'll talk briefly about that. More specifically, how do we leverage social media for our marketing purposes? So that's going to include what are we posting, even timing, the timing of our posts, and moves you should make. So I'll also be sharing with you just some concrete, straightforward things you can do to ensure that you are getting the most out of your social media marketing. Cool. So, what is social media? First of all, it's a trap. All right, it's an opportunity to really kind of capture the attention and capture not only the attention of people who are viewing your site, but it's also an opportunity for you to sort of capture and encapsulate your own work. Okay, so we see here it's a system of web-based communication tools that enable people to interact. And I really want to highlight that word, interact. Sometimes as social media users, we think, oh, I just put this up and then that's it. No, there's a lot more to being effective on social media or with social media than just putting your information out. You need to be thinking about, how do I get people to interact with my information? And also, how do I interact with other individuals who are in the social media space? Instagram, you mentioned earlier. How many of y'all read comments on Instagram? Okay, so if you are reading comments, I would imagine that some comments that stand out, you might see someone make a funny comment. For me, at least, when I see that, the first thing I do is I say, who is this person? Who is this person who is exhibiting a certain amount of wit? Or who is this person who maybe asked a question that the person whose page I'm on decided to answer to? Okay, so think about how you're interacting with other people on social media, and to be more explicit, make comments, talk, engage people in conversation, other people in conversation through social media. Also, you'll want to engage people who comment on your page. All right. One general rule, I won't say it's a rule, but I think a very functional approach to being effective in terms of your engagement and interaction on social media is to try to respond to people. Usually they say within an hour. Now, I know that's not always practical, but the most important idea here when you think about that is don't leave folks hanging. If somebody takes the time to make a comment on your page or to ask you a question about your work, do your very best to respond to that person. Do your very best to engage that individual. And how many of you all have Facebook business pages or have experience with? A couple of you do. One, I would recommend it mainly because it's free. Two, because Facebook, even though it's sort of waning in some ways in popularity, it's still the most used social media platform. And with that being said, when you have a business page, Facebook be looking at whether or not, and it'll tell on you, hey, this person takes X amount of time to respond to comments made on this page. So if you can, and if it's practical for you, you definitely want to make sure that you do take the time and that you're thoughtful about not only responding, but how you respond to people on your social media pages. So that's pretty straightforward. And what social media really is obviously ubiquitous. It's everywhere. So some folks, I think, try to get away from using social media in the first place. If you are serious about spreading your work and providing a platform through which people can access your work, it's hard to beat social media. In a lot of ways, you are paying for it, but not always monetarily. So I think it works to everyone's advantage to ensure that you do have some social media presence. Social media is exploitative. There's really no way around it. It's bringing in elements of desire, curiosity, and it's also normative. So when you think about those elements, think about how you can frame your work so that you're not just the one being exploited, right? Think about how can you exploit the value of social media? How can you leverage the value of social media to help your work, to sort of put you out there? Social media can also be very misleading. So that's another thing to think about. As artists and as creatives, sometimes we might become discouraged. Sometimes we might find ourselves wanting to mimic certain things that we see on social media. I would encourage all of you to really slow down, take a moment, and think about what's authentic and what's not on social media for yourself, and even as you view the social media personas or the work on social media by other people, because it can take you off track. It can represent something that's not always the most authentic or the most honest. And just as a general practice, I want to encourage all of you to make sure that you do your best to be as authentic as possible, because I do think that tends to yield the best outcomes. People can see through fakeness. And as artists and as creatives, obviously integrity is very important. So those are things that I think are important to really represent with regard to your social media personas. All right. What is marketing? Marketing is a challenge, right? And it's an ever-evolving challenge. The marketing landscape has changed tremendously, and it's going to continue to change, particularly within the social media context, y'all. So how many of you all have been using Facebook for more than, say, 5 years? Okay, so I'm sure it's probably unanimous. You all have seen how not only the platform itself has changed, but how content is delivered across the platform has really changed. It used to be where if you post a certain thing, all your friends would see it. Now, things are shifting quite a bit with regard to that. Facebook's algorithms never stay the same. They're always tweaking, they're always changing, they're always evolving. And what that means for us as users of social media, and in terms of our social media marketing, we have to likewise be changing and evolving. And a large part of that includes, when you see in my line when I talk about what marketing is the process of researching. So if you are going to stay on top of these changes that occur within how social media delivers content, y'all gotta continuously research. You have to get on Google. You have to do searches, even if you're not doing Google, whatever your search engine is. I like DuckDuckGo. I don't know if you all use that, but it doesn't track you as much. But it also doesn't yield as good of results as Google, unfortunately. But at any rate, it's important for you all to continuously research. You have to always be at the cutting edge of what's happening on social media, because if you aren't, you will find that you are not getting the traction and you won't be getting the reach that you'd like to have. Identifying, defining, and engaging a target audience for your product or service. This is so important, everybody. How many of you have a strong grasp of who your target audience is for your work? See? All right. For those who didn't look behind them, nobody raised their hand. So this is a key point that it really extends beyond just your social media work. And it also includes researching, and that's why I put that as the first thing. So you should be talking to people. You should be engaging. We saw that word, I think, in the last slide, talking about engagement. To identify your target market, because everybody ain't going to like your work necessarily. Everybody's not going to be a potential serious supporter or buyer. So what that means for you is you're going to have to do some work, which includes researching, which definitely includes defining your work. It's going to be difficult for you to identify who's going to rock with you or who's going to have some serious interest in what you're creating if you haven't very clearly defined what it is you're creating for yourself, right? when we think about really great marketing campaigns, when we think about really strong products, those products and those marketers do an incredible job of speaking straightforwardly and with great clarity about what their product is. And what that does for potential users or potential supporters or potential buyers, it means that there's no ambiguity when they ask themselves the question, what am I getting when I engage with this product, with this service, or in you all's case, what am I getting when I engage with this creative? Okay, so that also speaks to a great point Lauren made about what you need to have on your website. It's an about portion, talking about what you're about, okay? Very clearly defining what your work is, why you do it, and maybe even, depending upon who you are, even if you don't express this, you need to be thinking about it. You need to clearly define, who are you doing this work for, right? What is the work? Why are you doing it? And who are you doing it for? And then engaging your target. But it's going to be difficult to engage your target if you haven't first done your research, if you haven't first defined who you are, what it is you're doing, if you haven't identified who is your target audience. And that might be narrow, it might be broad. That's something for you to decide through your research and your own sort of internal reflection and exploration. But at the end of the day, if you're going to be an effective social media marketer, you're going to have to figure out how to engage your target, which is going to include knowing where your target is. It's hard to hit a target if you don't know where it's at, all right? So, and we'll come back to that in a little bit, but those are just some key points to really think about. So when you think about being really effective in this space, one thing you're going to have to do, or one of three things you're going to have to do, is focus on what you know. So I've added here, Facebook has a ton of resources. And a lot of this talk is going to be about Facebook, mainly because I've worked directly with Facebook, and they gave me a nice little workbook with a ton of information that I didn't know that Facebook provided for its users. So I would encourage you all to maybe take a shot here, not of alcohol, but take a shot of this image here, and definitely go to facebook.com/business. It provides a ton of resources about what Facebook does and has internally for your use. The same thing on Instagram. If you follow the bit.ly link there, it will also give you a ton of resources for Instagram also. So focus on what you know, and both Facebook and Instagram have a ton of online resources, plenty of online resources that can really help guide how you approach your marketing using those platforms. The next I'll go to is understanding your audience. Who is buying art? Who's buying the type of art that you're interested in? That could include identifying galleries or identifying museums, and then building relationships, engaging those individuals, those institutions, those spaces that already deal with work like yours, that already deal with creators like you, okay? So again, this is going to require some research, and it's also going to require some thoughtful engagement, reaching out to these people. A lot of folks love to hear from other people who are doing similar work, who are creating work that they might be able to buy, or that they might be able to engage in some other meaningful way. So make sure you take these opportunities to reach out. Don't forget about the social part of social media, and that's going to include you taking advantage of opportunities to connect. All right. Where are they? Again, if you don't know where a target is, it's really hard to hit. So thinking about local, and also thinking really broad. America has a lot of cachet internationally still, even though that might be waning for some reasons. But think beyond, think hyper local, but also think hyper broadly, I guess. You want to think beyond your immediate spaces because there are always opportunities that are uncovered or that might be covered up and waiting for you to uncover them. Okay, so don't close yourself off when you're considering where opportunities might lie for you. Don't close yourself off even when you're thinking about who might be able to offer an opportunity to you or for you. Okay, so be very expansive in your approach to where you might want to place your work or with whom you might want to share your work. And what is the level of engagement? A lot of times on social media, we spin our wheels, maybe using hashtags that don't work. I'll talk a little bit more about that. Well, I'll talk about it now. Hashtag Facebook, for instance. Here's a pro tip. Facebook is constantly working on that algorithm to favor current events, things that are happening now. So if you can figure out a way to connect or tether your work, that's the word I like to use, to tether what it is you're doing to things that are occurring right now, today, this week, that gives you a leg up and also increases the likelihood that whatever it is you post is going to be delivered more efficiently and more people are going to see it. Another pro tip is when you're thinking about using hashtags, which Instagram is very hashtag heavy, consider hashtagging ideas that might not be directly, that your work might not directly speak to, but might be related to. So for instance, I was reading an article about social media and one person was saying that they found that they post a lot about whiskey. They're a whiskey lover. And that what they saw happening was they would be delivered ads or some of the things that would pop up on their Instagram posts would be about cigars because a lot of people drink whiskey and smoke cigars. So think about what ideas, what products, what other things might be tethered to your work or related to aspects of your work that you can, what are your cigars, I guess is another way to say it. You know, or if your work is cigars, what is the whiskey to your cigar, okay? So think about that. That can really broaden your reach, that can really expand your reach, and it can also be an opportunity to introduce you to other spaces, other targets, other opportunities for you to be a little bit more expansive and have greater reach. Another thing I'll say about what is the level of engagement, make sure you're creating some diversity in how you talk about your work. If you are using the same post over and over again, and I have an example later on in our slides, but if you are using the same language, if you are essentially being lazy in your social media approach, it's not going to pay, or it's not going to pay off. You're going to be the one paying, because ultimately what's going to happen is the effort and the energy you put into it is not going to yield any benefit for you. So think about how do you create some diversity in what you say about your work, how you say it, and even the types of work that you post, okay? Because the levels of engagement for people who are seeing the same thing over and over from you are inevitably going to be low. And inevitably also, it's not going to pay off. What are people buying? So that goes to, Lauren spoke about analytics. Google Analytics is obviously extremely, really useful, but also just researching and trying to find additional analytics about the art world, about the creative world. There's so many resources online, and I think sometimes we don't think deeply enough about how do we analyze what's happening online, what are people buying, what are people doing, where are people going, and how do the answers to those questions, or how might the answers to those questions influence and inform our approach to our social media personas, and how much money. And when I say how much money, the question is, how much are people spending on this? Maybe nobody's spending any money in your area right now. Or maybe they're spending that money overseas somewhere, okay? These are questions that you are going to have to ask yourself, and that should also influence your approach to social media. If the wave hasn't hit the United States, or the wave hasn't hit Michigan for your style of work, or for whatever it is that you're creating, then maybe you shouldn't be spinning your wheels trying to target a Michigan audience, or a Detroit audience, or an American audience. If the money's not there, and that's not to say that all of us are angling for money. I would hope that we understand the value that money allows many of us to keep producing the type of work that we want to produce, because materials ain't free. I know y'all know that. But we should really be thinking, you hear the phrase, follow the money. You should be thinking about, where's the money being spent? And even if it's not being spent on your work per se, or the type of thing you're creating, where is the marketing money being spent? Because we can always think about not only how to frame things, but we might need to make other pivots or small adjustments to what it is we're doing with regard to our creations, but also with regard to how we're marketing, okay? So following the money is really important. Key strategies for social media marketing. You see my first one, which is one of my favorite things to say to people. Be shameless, all right? Be shameless. When you think about all of the companies that are doing a great job marketing, they ain't got no shame. They are putting it out there. They're doing it over and over again. And, we think about when we walk out of this building, when we get in our cars and we drive home, we see billboards. When we're listening to the radio, we hear commercials. When we are watching television, we see commercials. And when we're online, damn it, it's pop-ups everywhere, or maybe not pop-ups, but we have advertising being pushed in our direction relentlessly. Well, it's because marketing is really about being shameless. And if you are serious about pushing your career forward, if you are serious about ensuring that as many eyes get to see the work that you're creating, then you have to be shameless. And this also expands beyond the social media realm. Talk to folks about your work. Talk to people about what it is you're doing. Inevitably, you're going to get some sort of feedback. You're going to get some sort of response that will allow you to improve your approach or your work, even if it's a criticism, right? No matter what it is, you can take that information and use it to better present your work, to refine whatever it is you're already doing. So I can't stress enough, be shameless. Second key strategy with regard to social media marketing, and also just marketing in general, is create and share value, okay? Think about what's valuable, not only to yourself, but to your audience. And once you figure that out, once you have a firm understanding of where the value lies, or at which point the value exists, then share it, put it out there. A lot of artists, a lot of creatives are like, I don't know if I want to put that out. Nah, put it out there. There's, again, being shameless, if people don't see your work, they have no opportunity to engage with it. They have no opportunity to give you some feedback. So be shameless and really be willing to share what it is you're making, what it is you're creating. I've already mentioned this before, but know your why. This goes back to the about. What are you about? What are you doing it for? Who are you doing it for? And take some time to really think about how to effectively articulate the answers to those questions. Understanding timing. Have you all ever missed a bus or missed an opportunity just because you were just a little bit too late? Or maybe just a little bit too early? or nobody cared because you were talking about a thing at a time. You were maybe ahead of your time. All right. So thinking about what is the timing, we have to really be intentional about when we're doing whatever it is we're doing, because that can significantly impact who gets engaged, who cares, who even sees it. Okay. With regard to, I think I have a slide we'll come to that even shows what times different people are using social media, right? When are people on? I know a lot of folks, a former partner of mine, she used to get up every morning and spend probably the first 30 minutes of the day while she was kind of milling around the house, looking at Instagram. She would have her phone in her hand and be laughing and telling me to come and look at this and look at that. Timing. If somebody wanted to catch her, that was the time of day to get her, right? If she was a part of maybe any one of you all's target audience, then, and I don't think she's alone in that. How many of you all scroll Instagram early in the morning? Yeah, a lot of people do, right? So think about when your audience, first of all, you got to know your audience, but then you have to understand what time or what times are they actually engaging in the social media spaces that you want to reach them. And lastly, video is your friend. Video is continuously gaining more traction as the preferred style of media, okay? One, motion pictures. A static image only can go so far. But if you are able to create compelling video and compelling language that you're actually sharing, one, it provides a deeper level of engagement. Two, it catches the eye a little bit more. It also provides the element of suspense, because when you start a video, you actually don't know necessarily, when you start watching a video, you don't necessarily know how it's going to finish. You don't necessarily know what more content is going to be held there. And so, again, video is super, super important, and it also receives preferential treatment on most social media platforms. Facebook definitely prioritizes videos over regular, static images. Another thing is, don't be afraid to use, I can't think of what they call it on Facebook, but when you are, what am I trying to say? What's the Instagram where you, stories. I don't know why I couldn't think of stories. Right. Don't be afraid to use stories, okay? They are also gaining popularity in terms of what gets distributed most, or stories. Is it Facebook stories too? Is that what they call? Is that what Facebook calls theirs? Yeah. So Instagram stories, Facebook stories, make sure you all think about how you can deliver content or create something interesting and engaging and share that through stories. It's also going to be really important when you talk about being an effective social media marketer. Here's a graph it's from last year for Facebook's global engagement. And it gives us an idea of the density of engagement across several different times. So I'm a night owl. I like to be up late. But what we see here is that if I'm posting late at night, there aren't many eyes that are going to see what it is I'm posting, okay? But if I'm posting around lunchtime between 9 a.m. and really 4 p.m., 4 or 5 p.m., I'm going to get a pretty good, no matter which day of the week it is, I'm going to get some pretty good traction. So you all, when we talk about timing, and this is through research, these are things that we should be thinking about. Wednesday, Thursday, Friday. It's really hot during the day for people, yes. Actually, I got it from Sprout Social. So if you look, Sprout Social, yep. So if you go look on Sprout Social, you'll be able to find this. I don't think in my Facebook materials they have information like this. But again, please do explore the the Facebook business page. And you can also look, if you do a Google search for Facebook, just look up Facebook marketing tips. That's like a simple Google search that all of you should do. Yes, sir. You know, actually, that's a great question. And to make sure everybody heard it, he asked, is it important to post on social media before these times so that when people actually engage at the times we see here in the graph, that it pops up? So there's some argument about that. I can't give you a hard yes or no. What I can say is I think it's a little bit more of a crapshoot. If you are posting early and with hopes that your content's going to, if you're posting at 6 a.m. with hopes that people around noon are going to catch that 6 a.m. Post. And here's why. Between 6 and noon, you are also competing with millions of other people or hundreds of thousands of other people who are also fighting to have their content rise to the top. All right. And some of those people might be more frequent posters, which is another thing that Facebook prioritizes. If you post regularly with some regularity, you're going to get preferential treatment as opposed to people who post every now and then. All right. So there are all of these factors that Facebook and Instagram and other social media platforms take into consideration when it comes to what gets delivered to the most people. So my recommendation is to stay kind of close to these times, to when you think about, and these may not be the best times for your audience also, okay? This is just a general snapshot of when people are making a lot of use of social media. So I can't stress enough knowing who your audience is, but it's hard to game the system, and the system gets smarter every day, okay? So what they want to prioritize is the now, is immediacy. So, hey, we want people doing things in the moment, and Facebook most certainly prioritizes folks who do it right away. I made a post yesterday about some work that I'm doing, and I immediately, I think within like 30 minutes, I had over 100 likes. So I think part of that, though, was the time that I posted it. It was the content of my post. And it was also, and I'll say another thing about that post. Later on in the evening, the rapidness or the rapidity of the likes and engagement that I was getting definitely slowed down. You know what I'm saying? And I was still within the window of the times where people were on Facebook, but I got my most engagement right away. So I would err on the side of posting when you want to post during the hot spots, as opposed to posting early and hoping that when the spot gets hot, people are going to engage your content. Any other questions on this? All right. Here we have, so I talked about creating some diversity and switching up the ways that you present your information. Here's an example from Tales of the Cocktail about pushing out a post about why you should consider selling merchandise at your bar. So what we see here is the same content, but framed in two different ways. The first post is from December. The second post is from the following month, January. But we see that we see that Tales of the Cocktail has been really thoughtful in what it is and how they present their information. So this is just a very straightforward and simple example that you all can maybe take a couple of notes from if you have content that you definitely know you want to push out to your audience, or you push it out in January and it doesn't get a certain amount of traction, and you're like, okay, I still need to make sure that folks engage with this material. Send it out again in February. Send it out again a couple of weeks later, but don't use the same copy, okay? You want to change your language, not only because people might get bored or they may say, I've seen this before, I skip it, but also the social media algorithms are going to treat your content differently if you use the same text versus if you switch it up a bit. So this is a really important an important thing to think about. And another thing we see that in December it only got 52 likes, and in January it got double those likes. Okay, so and no telling what type of engagement it actually got. No telling how many people ended up clicking on it in January versus December. So that's another really important thing. So what are some moves you can make? What are some direct, straightforward things that you can do right away to help increase your efficacy and your engagement in social media marketing? Well, let me tell you. Back to the first thing, being shameless. I cannot stress that enough. Also, asking for what you want. A lot of social media posts they fail to give people a directive, or they fail to ask for ask users to do what it is they want them to do, right? A lot of us really drop the ball in that regard. We assume that people already know what to do, or we assume that people are going to infer an action that they should take without us saying it explicitly. So when you're on social media, one thing you can do very directly: go to my page, go do this, click on this, share this if you want it to be shared. And it's all in how you frame it. You know, your audience might respond better to a soft ask. Another person's audience may respond better to somebody saying very directly, do this thing, okay? So you're gonna have to know who your audience is and how to approach them. But the overarching idea is be shameless. Don't be afraid to ask. Don't be afraid to tell folks what you want them to do. The marketplace is not a place for those afraid to ask. When we look, and another thing I'll say about shamelessness is, if you're wondering or unsure about how to make an ask, look toward your favorite brands. Look toward the big brands that are doing work that you respect and admire, because I can guarantee you those individuals, they know how to ask their customer base for what it is they want. They know how to tell their customer base how to effectively engage their product or service. And so we can always really learn from looking in those spaces and examining how those companies or how those products do what it is they do with regard to marketing. And we can emulate that in our own social media, personas. Again, creating and sharing value. What is an hour of your time worth, right? That's understanding what the value is of what it is you're creating. So all of you should, I think that's a great place to really center your practice. What is the value of your time worth? And once you answer that question, you can justify what you charge for your work, right? If your work takes, if an hour of your time is, say, $1,000 maybe, and a piece of work takes 2 hours, okay, to put together, then you can actually justify asking price of $2,000, because now you have some math behind it. You have an equation that helps explain why your product is valued, why you value your product the way that you have. Now, that doesn't necessarily mean that the market is going to pay your price, but it at least helps you create a baseline for understanding the value of what it is you're doing. What do your customers care about? That goes back to our conversation about researching and effectively engaging people who might buy your product and engage in the members of your target audience. And again, social media values video. So think about what type of video you can create that is engaging, that is informative, that definitely illustrates the value that you and your work bring to the table. Knowing your why. This is so important for creatives. Being able to articulate why it is you do what it is you're doing. It's a great place for conversations. It's a great place for you to share why you do what you do. If you have a great explanation and a really thoughtful explanation or way of articulating why you're creating the work you're creating, that can make all the difference in generating your audience and keeping your audience, okay? So think about how to have those conversations. Think about where to have those conversations. How many of you are members of Facebook groups? All right. If you aren't engaging Facebook groups, y'all are losing. There's so many groups with so many different points of affinity on Facebook that those are audiences that you could be having conversations with. I'm a member of a group called The Freshest Clams, and it's such an interesting group of people, a really diverse group of people who love new music. They call the clams is their shorthand for new, interesting music. And I jump in that group from time to time, and I find all sorts of music that I've never heard before. There are all sorts of interesting conversations occurring about the music, and there are also a ton of points of intersection, any of which I can jump into and begin to engage and talk and learn and allow people to learn about me and my musical interests. So if you are not part of Facebook groups, I encourage you, I demand that you go home and do a quick search of groups that are associated with work, the types of work that you might be doing. Also, have conversations with other people. Like, those 2 points are related. But think about, maybe your classmate whose work you like, but maybe you've never spoken to them. Or maybe your classmate said something, in class that caught your ear, but you didn't follow up and talk to them about it. Take these opportunities, you all, to really get engaged, to really spark conversations, because you never know what might come of them, okay? And lastly, thinking about what time it is. Is the social context appropriate for what it is you're pushing? Think about your timing. It's so important. Is the time of day appropriate for you making a post? Is your audience even on Facebook? Are they more on Instagram? Is it the other way around? Are they more on Twitter? Think about your timing. Think about where you are in space and time and exploit that. Use that to your advantage. And be consistent. Whatever you do, be consistent. Social media definitely rewards users who are consistent. Any questions? Ask shamelessly. Nope. All right. Well, thank you all so much. I hope that some of what I shared was helpful. If you all want to ask me afterwards, I'll be here for a few minutes. And best of luck to all of you as you continue creating work and sharing your work and engaging users. Yep.